Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some of this measurable, observable behavior that signals internalized knowledge of syntactic islands, of these preferences and dispreferences for different types of WH dependencies. So let's start with this one. We can see here sort of, again, the broad scale picture, the cartoon picture of what's going on, but let's break it down a little bit more. So in this case, we're looking at adult knowledge as measured by acceptability judgment behavior. And this data comes from Sprouse and colleagues 2012 using magnitude estimation judgments. And what they did here is create an experiment that had two salient properties of island crossing dependencies. And they had these two factors. And the first was the length of the dependency matrix versus embedded, right? Matrix versus, in this case, embedded across a tensed complementizer phrase. And then the second factor was the presence or absence of an island structure just anywhere in that utterance, period, right? Either you had a non-island structure or you had an island structure, right? These are your two factors, length and presence of the island structure. Now, you can create there are sets of stimuli, therefore, that look at these two factors for each of the islands, actually, that we reviewed before. So if we look at subject islands, you can create a stimulus where you have a matrix dependency and a non-island structure. Who thinks the necklace is expensive? You can then create an embedded dependency with that same non-island structure. What does Jack think is expensive? You can turn back to having a matrix dependency, but now have an island structure just present in the utterance. Who thinks the necklace for Lily is expensive? And then, of course, you can have an embedded dependency and an island structure, and in this case, it happens to be crossing that island structure. Who does Jack think the necklace for is expensive? So you get these sets of four stimuli for these different island types. In this case, the subject island. You can do the same thing for weather islands. What does the teacher wonder whether Jack stole? You can do the same thing for adjunct islands. What does the teacher worry if Lily forgot? You can do the same thing for complex MP islands. What did the teacher make the claim that Lily forgot? Right? So same idea, crossing length versus presence of an island structure. And then what you can do to look for that behavioral signal is a super additive interaction of the two factors. That is, this is the additional unacceptability that arises when the two factors, length of the dependency and presence or absence of an island structure, when they're combined, right? They each have some unacceptability associated with them. I'll show you that more pictorially in a minute, right? But there's additional unacceptability above and beyond the independent contribution of each factor, right? That's a signal of, you know what, something else is wrong with this latent structure of the syntactic island. That's the idea. So let me show you what this looks like. So if you have this kind of interaction plot, on the x-axis you have the length of the dependency, matrix versus embedded. And on the y-axis, in this case, it's a z-score rating, how acceptable adults judge these things. And we'll look at when we have no island structure versus when we have an island structure. Okay, so let's start, right? Now, suppose we compare the difference in acceptability between, just in the matrix, we have a matrix dependency, but let's look at a non-island structure versus an island structure. When you add an island structure and we just, you know what, we just like it a little bit less. How much less? Maybe this much less, maybe this much less, whatever it is, that's the unacceptability of just having an island structure there. Okay. Now, if we shift, what if we say, okay, let's consider our matrix dependency with no island structure, but what happens if we turn it into an embedded dependency? Right? How much less do we like it then? No island structure, but just the difference between matrix versus embedded. This is the impact of length, right? We dislike it this much or whatever it happens to be, right? So how much we dislike it because there's an island structure, how much we dislike it because it's an embedded dependency, right? So then what happens if you then say, okay, well, how much do we dislike something that is both an embedded dependency and has an island structure, right? If it's just those two factors stacked on top of each other, you end up with something like this. That's how much you like it. The difference between this and this, matrix non-island and embedded island, is just how much you dislike having an embedded one and how much you dislike having an island. Done. However, if you have additional unacceptability, it goes lower, right? That's this super additive interaction, right? The extra unacceptability above and beyond the fact that it's an embedded dependency, above and beyond the fact that you have an island structure in there. Right? And so this shows up in these sorts of interaction plots as non-parallel lines. So just at a glance, you can say, okay, it's like extra bad because I see this as non-parallel lines, versus if they were parallel lines, it would just be additive. And that's one sort of pictorial representation of this superadditivity. Now, there's another way to look at this, which is the one that we looked at more recently, which is as an island difference, right? If we just sort of look at how much we dislike something when it has an island in it, right? If we look at it in the matrix version, we look at it in the embedded version, right? Then that we're just comparing how much you dislike something because there was an island structure present. And in this case, we dislike it this much, right? This is the island difference on the matrix dependencies. This is the island difference on the embedded dependencies. And if there's still extra badness, right, like that's our superadditivity. So if we translate that over here, what's the difference between non-island structure versus island structure? Okay, it's this much. Okay, that's over on the matrix dependencies. Now on the embedded dependencies, how much do I dislike it because now it's got an island structure in it? Okay, it's how much I disliked it before. Is there an extra bit? Yes or no? If so, right, that's that extra bit. So that's if in this kind of island difference plot, what you're looking for that superadditivity is, again, the extra bit. I dislike something because it has an island structure above and beyond the fact that it is just an embedded dependency in this case, and so you're looking here at a positive slope line, an increase in the difference. So this is another way to kind of at a glance tell you that you've got superadditivity in these sorts of island difference plots. You look for a positive slope, a positive difference when you go from matrix to embedded. Okay. So we look back at Sprouse and colleagues' judgments from adults, and we see indeed in their previous version of the interaction plots, non-parallel lines for all 4 of our island types. Fantastic. That means that, okay, we have superadditivity, and if we're thinking about that in terms of the difference scores, there is in fact a positive difference, right, for each of these, right? There's an extra bit of badness that occurs because it seems like you're crossing an island. So in general then, this has been interpreted, and we're going to interpret it here is that this is the behavioral signal that knowledge about these dependencies crossing island structures is there, and these island crossing dependencies are dispreferred.